Oh boy, I've got a good one. Today we're going to look at Cootie. This game here was invented in Robbinsdale, Minnesota in 1948 by William Herbert Schaper. He liked to go as Herb. He was whittling a fishing lure when he got the idea for a children's game, so the original versions of Cootie were actually made out of wood and sold at his family's bakery until he started Schaper Toys in 1949. Production of the game Cootie changed over to plastic pieces, and the game was a hit, selling over 1 million copies by 1952. So today we're going to have a look at an original 1949 edition and compare it to this 2021 edition. Let's see what's changed and what stayed the same over the course of about 70 years. Why don't we get the game on the table and dig right in? All right, this is awesome. Today we've got an original 1949 edition of Cootie from Schaper Games, and we're going to compare it to this 2021 edition from Hasbro. So let's see what's changed and what stayed the same over the course of about 70 years. So let's get started with the 1949 edition and its box. Right away, we have this bright red and yellow box art, which is awesome and eye-catching. However, I'm going to say the original design of the Cootie and this accompanying art makes the Cootie look very creepy crawly, especially those kind of lifeless eyes. I have no other way to say it, but this 1949 Cootie can stare straight through your soul. The back of the box is blank. When we open it up, we have this really cool organizer, which is actually integral to the game. So according to the rules of the game, players will take turns rolling a die, and the corresponding number on the die and the part in the board is how they will assemble their Cootie, starting with the body and the head. So for instance, in order to get all 6 legs, you're going to need to roll 6 at least 6 times throughout the game, and so on throughout all of the other body parts. So it's a game of pure chance, and the only real choice the player has are the colors of the components that they're choosing, like the head and the body, at least early on. Later you'll see there's some variety introduced. Now, another thing that I really like about the original box is if you flip over the top lid, you'll see that the rules are printed on the underside of the lid of the box, which, if you've watched any of my reviews before, you know this pleases the couch. I love it when they print rules on the box of the game itself. It makes it much easier to keep track of them and not have them get damaged or lost over time. So let's hop over to the 2021 edition of Cootie from Hasbro. So right away, we have a completely different style of box. This one's a flip top made of a much thinner tag board. And I gotta say, with no organizer and all of the small parts, it's a little frustrating how large the gap in the box is. Now, granted, the parts are generously sized, so they're less likely to fall out. But if you don't handle this box gently in storage, I can see where a lot of the smaller pieces are going to shake out over time. You're best to get yourself a little plastic bag to keep everything, or like a little drawstring bag, something to keep all of your parts together. There's enough room in here to bag all of these parts up neatly and still have space to stow them. But the box itself just isn't going to do the job of storing the pieces. Now, that being said, the art is great. I actually really like these cartoony representations of the Cooties. You also have a picture of a little girl enjoying the game, and when you flip it over, you've got 2 children having fun playing together. And I recognize that little guy with the mohawk. He was on the back of Don't Spill the Beans, so hey, go get him, kid. Awesome that you're getting around doing some modeling for these games. So maybe he'll get to be as famous as the 1986 Mousetrap kid that I thought was so cool. This is a really nice representation of what you get in the game, both on the cover and the back, but the box itself doesn't do a great job of storing the game components. Now, let's get on to the games themselves, starting with the 1949 edition. Right away, we can see that the actual Cootie components are much lighter weight. I put one together here so that you can see the parts fit in nicely. They don't really snap into place. They don't require much force, and you can see as I'm kind of moving it, oop, the legs are kind of wiggling around and everything. I would be a little bit nervous if I had to start snapping stuff in place, because these types of plastics start to get brittle over time, and this is a pretty old representation of this game, but everything's held up really well. It stayed quite clean. We didn't need to do a whole lot of refurbishment when we got this in. Did track down some spare parts, so you'll notice some slight color differences in the plastic of the legs that I have in this kit. I can't remember what else, but we got basically the same molds from a year or two later, and there's always a little bit of plastic color variance just due to the dyes. But I love the organizer being part of the game, the simplicity of rolling a die and picking out the body parts. I mean, this is a kid's game, and really a lot of the fun is in building the Cootie. And actually, as far as the origins of the game, Herb had originally carved a fishing lure. Herb Schaper had carved a fishing lure out of wood. He was just kind of whittling one down and came up with the idea. So the original models for the Cooties, these were actually made of wood and inspired by a fishing lure that he made. They sold the wood versions in the family bakery until he started Schaper Toys in '49. So neat little history there. Again, not everything fits too tightly, but enough. So again, if you're playing with a little kid, this version of the game, you're going to want to play both with a child with the patience to roll, six times in the game to complete it. But the challenge of rolling these die and the random nature, I mean, this is just a little bit more complicated than Candyland in that a kid needs to recognize numbers. Which is, Candyland requires a kid recognizes colors, but neither one of these require any difficult strategy or skill. So this is another excellent game for early childhood, and it's fun. A lot of kids enjoy the aspect of putting together the Cootie. So I love how the game is actually, the box is integrated in as part of the game and helps keep everything not only organized, because that's another skill. If you're teaching, don't overlook that each time the kid has to play the game, they have to put all of the parts back and keep track of where they are numbered and how to organize. That's actually a really neat skill. So when they say that this game is a learning game on the cover art that's educational, keep in mind, not all education is reading, writing, and arithmetic. It can be something as simple as teaching a kid the basic mechanics of how to assemble things according to instructions, number recognition, and organization skills. So some of these skills that might not necessarily be apparent right away. Originally, I kind of teased that the only thing that this game could call itself educational for was teaching a kid what the word proboscis means. But realistically speaking, when you take in those other skills into account, it actually is pretty nice that it teaches a child how to assemble a piece, disassemble the piece. So you've got some light early childhood mechanical knowledge there, and organizing things. That's going to be really important. Understanding that keeping components and, for instance, you could apply this to organizing a kitchen. Let's say teaching a child the very basics of if you keep things in a place that you know where to find them and that they're logical and make sense will help you when it's time to play the game or organize into a little assembled Cootie. So it's kind of interesting in that regard. I like that. Don't undersell that, because there are some kids that can really help. In the 2021 edition, the game box isn't really integral to the game itself, and players will find that they'll be pouring all of the parts out basically in a pile on the table and then selecting what parts to assemble from based on what they get with this spinner. So the die has been replaced with a spinner, and it's kind of confusing because they do these color wedges, but what you're really paying attention to is what part of the Cootie is represented, except for this wild one. This wild one is how you select a body and a head. So the idea is, and you don't have to select, basically it's wild, so you're not bound to any color of the body or the head, but essentially when you're playing the game, instead of having to roll a 1 to get your body and say a 2 to get your head, now it's just you have to land here once to get the body, again to get the head, and then the rest of these to start getting the parts. But if you land on a wild part, or this wild piece, you can pick whatever part you need. So again, the game is over a lot faster. I also noticed things like the colors that represent certain body parts aren't representative of the actual plastic part. Like for instance, there's 2 leg spots. So right away, like the original game, you had to roll a 6 on a D6 6 times to complete your Cootie. In this instance, you got to get 6 legs. Well, you have 2 opportunities and a wild. So you have basically a 50-50 chance of scoring a leg to assemble your Cootie. So the current design not only teaches 0 vocabulary, 0 number recognition, and because the colors of the pieces, like the legs are represented as orange, they only come in purple and green if you look at the models. The mouths are represented as being pink, but as you can see, all of their mouths are yellow. Same with the antennae being represented as green, but all of the antennae are yellow. The eyes are purple, and as you can see, the eyes are all white pieces with stickers on them. The color has nothing to do. It's just that there's a wild space on here. So I feel like there was a greater design intended for this, and it got abandoned partway through in favor of making the game as simple as possible. So I get the feeling, based on the introduction and then reduction of colors on this, or at least the reduction of their usefulness and application in the game, I'm led to believe that the original concept for the 2021 Cootie probably had some additional rules that ended up not being so successful, but they didn't go so far as to redesign the game greatly. So that's just how it feels. It really feels the 1949 rules and everything make perfect sense. And I think it's a great game for a young kid. The 2021, sure, a kid's going to enjoy themselves, but it's like on super easy mode, a 50-50 shot to get the legs. Instead of making them tough, the legs are supposed to be kind of one of the hardest parts. Part of some of the experience of playing board games is experiencing setbacks, frustrations, and getting to overcome obstacles. And one thing that I don't like that they do with a lot of modern children's games is dumb them down or simplify them. And here's another prime example of you take what was the most difficult feat to achieve of the original game and arguably probably made the game last long. I mean, rolling 6 6s at that stage in the game, arguably the game is going to be guaranteed to last a certain duration depending on how many players, whereas when you have a 50-50 shot, boy, that's just going to speed things along. I feel like that's a rule intended to shorten the gameplay and rules intended to shorten gameplay, in my opinion. Why are you playing a game? Usually you're playing a game to pass the time and to have some fun as part of the experience. And when you change the rules to make the experience so fleeting that you start robbing a little bit of the joy from the experience, well, I think that's a bad change. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I am kind of frustrated with that update, and I prefer using a die like they intended in 1949. Now, before we get too far into my thoughts on the game, because we are getting too far into opinion here, let's talk about the rules we already covered in 49. We have the awesome rules printed on the underside of the lid of the box. In 2021, we have a nice full color sealed paper, full bleed, just nice booklet for the rules. You have all the assembly instructions. The spinner parts were the only small parts that came on a sprue that I had to punch out and assemble. So there's a nominal amount of assembly that you would need to do. You don't want to leave that to a little kid. Most kids will figure that out, but you don't want them punching out sprues. So especially the age that this is intended for. But other than that, all of the parts are nice and chunky and everything, pretty easy to come pre-popped out. So the instructions for assembly are pretty much put together the spinner and put the stickers on the eyeballs, and that's about it. Then you have your basic gameplay instructions. The hints are not too helpful because most of them are just, hey, show off your own individual style by mixing and matching colors. So, yay, that's exciting. Actually, to be honest, you'll notice I took the time to make sure that their feet matched. But I cannot imagine how frustrating it would be because there's so many feet that look similar but aren't, to have mismatched feet on here. You know, that's the thing. That's why adults got to be careful when they play these games. You can't be a perfectionist. It'll drive you mad. But the instructions here will stand the test of time. They're just more likely to get lost because they're a separate piece not attached to the box, and you have that big gap in the box's closure. So I'm going to throw the win over to the 1949 edition, and hopping into the subject of replacement parts and losing parts, I didn't see any information on Hasbro's edition about getting replacement parts, but lo and behold, in 1949, Schaper Manufacturing in Minneapolis, Minnesota here, there we go, representing for the Great White North. So they actually have a replacement parts order form included. Now, this was actually pretty common with games of this era, which is something that I admire. I mean, I can't really remember the last time I opened a modern game, just a modern, regular consumer value game, not like a fancy boutique one, that had a replacement part list. So this is pretty neat. That was neat to find. So now let's get into the nitty gritty. I already started kind of getting into the realm of personal opinion here, and I slipped too far before I got into the rules. But now I can safely talk about which one I prefer. And I'm going to say that I actually prefer the gameplay of the 1949 edition. It's kind of interesting is a lot of game makers would like to eliminate dice from their game. Now, if you're replacing it with a spinner, arguably you're not making any changes to allow for strategy. You're still dealing with random chance. But throughout the ages, there have been a lot of efforts from game makers to either remove or reintroduce dice depending on their current moral standing. A good example of this is the original Checkered Game of Life from 1860 didn't have dice or a die because they didn't want people using it for gambling. So you will see that sometimes there are games that were developed with a spinner that the question is not so much if it was a cost thing, like is it a cost issue to put a die in a game versus a spinner? Well, depends on your era and what you're manufacturing. Arguably, I would say in our current era, to put a small plastic die in a game is probably actually cheaper than producing this spinner that required some plastic pieces delivered on a sprue and this printout here on this nice tag board. I mean, actually, this probably cost more. Now, why would they opt for a spinner? Well, in this instance, they're probably looking to reduce choking hazards and to have better control over the rules of the game. Getting a regular old six-sided die like this with pips, that's easy. But getting a six-sided die that's distributed in such a way that you have your own unique markings on it, maybe unique colors, well, you'll notice a lot of modern games that try to do that will provide you with stickers to put on your dice, which end up not holding up well and kind of looking trashy. I'm not a big fan of blank die with stickers on them for custom games. I would rather either a custom printed die or just stay with tradition. But the spinner's a good way to tackle that. So you also don't have, when you're rolling a die, it can roll off the table, it can land on the floor. With a spinner, you just pass it around to everybody. Pretty easy to keep track of. So it's not necessarily like a morality thing, like the older board game du jour of removing dice in favor of spinners, because of course parents would be less likely to buy them from their kids if they were more of a conservative nature. But instead we're looking at how does it affect the gameplay. And in this instance, I think this was an unnecessary change. I actually think it detracts from the game. I think the addition of the spinner, it's dumb. It's just dumb. I try to make an argument for it, but look at the thought that went into this game. Even if it's simple and not necessarily attractive to adults, it's perfect for its target market. You get to build something. Kids love to build little 3D toys. You have numbers corresponding to the numbers on the die. Real simple. You teach organizational skills. I mean, this to me, the whole package is head and shoulders above, hey, the shtick that they're trying to stick to is the silly building mechanic. And I mean, the pieces are nice and big and chunky. They fit. Wow, if I was giving this to a little kid, I guess one thing I'm concerned with is the pieces do fit together really tight. And when I go back to 1949, I mean, yeah, these are, I think most kids would actually be pretty capable of handling this. I mean, these pieces are resilient. I mean, it's not the tightest fit, but it's also not super loose. And the idea is you're sort of building a model. So, I don't know, these bigger chunky ones, I'm going to say I do like some of the detail that they add, the different types of shoes, the different facial expressions and stuff like that. They're definitely colorful, and they seem softer, less sharp, less buggy. These are more personable. They definitely, with the eyes, much more personable and less insecty. But darn, if these pieces don't really stick in there a bit more than I don't know, little kids can handle that stuff, but you're sort of teaching them to be rough with it because they really have to. That was, I mean, oh. They didn't cheap out on components. These, Hasbro definitely provided high quality plastic components. These are very nice. How they fit together is nice. I guess you really need to break them in a bit, but it seems a little firm. What we got? Age 3+. Yeah, 3-year-old's just gonna smack this on a table. What, you know what I mean? Like, that's, I guess. Oh, there we go. Look at that. I was trying to pull apart this. The body is not supposed to pull apart like that. That's, I actually have to. Oh, darn, that one was in there. Okay. You know, I mean, it's a game. It's a game. It does achieve what the original set out to do, in that you basically play a game of random chance to assemble a really fun, endearing, exciting little, like, I like these guys. They're fun. They're full of personality. I do like how chunky they are. I mean, they're not, you know, this isn't like a horrid toy that just doesn't do its job. It misses the mark in a number of regards, and I am a full-grown adult critiquing a game made for a 3-year-old. So, I mean, take everything with a grain of salt here. I am in a basement, too. But at the end of the day, if I was buying this for a kid, I would say gameplay-wise, they're better games. I'd probably get a retro copy. Honestly. Maybe something from the 80s or something before they predating where they had the spinner, because I just like, I'm not worried. I mean, I guess what's our age here? Do they even have one? They don't even have an age in 49. They don't even have a recommended age. So use your judgment. You know what I mean? Use your judgment. But I could see like a 5-6-year-old, you know, playing with this. Even a younger kid. 3-year-olds. My buddy's kid's 3. He's pretty sharp. He's on the ball. He knows how to play with Hot Wheels. I'd say if a kid's old enough to be able to play with Hot Wheels or Barbie or a classic toy like that, they should be able to handle Cootie. You know, and this is also, there's something to be said for teaching a kid how to be a little bit gentle with some toys. And when they're learning how to assemble stuff, it takes a deft touch. Really, like, that's a coordination thing. It takes a deft touch for a young kid when they're learning how to put together models and put together things that are a little bit more touchy. You know, you're going to have to do that in life. You might work in an industrial situation where you're in a shop or working assembly or everything, where you got to put things together in a tricky manner. You could be doing it for a hobby, any number of things. It's a good skill to have. I think you develop more of it working with the 1949 edition than you do with the 2021 edition. I think the 2021 edition offers quite a bit of fun, and I think it goes after the core mechanic of the original intended Cootie, but I think it does it well, in a lackluster way, really. Like I said, it feels like we're missing a rule set that should be there just by the integration of these colors that then have no effect on the game. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and say I like the 1949 edition. Now I'm curious, what version of Cootie did you have? Did you have Cootie growing up? Does it bug you that it's Cootie singular? Because I gotta say, for some reason, this is like a personal Mandela effect. I could have swore that the game was called Cooties, but once I got to work on this video, I realized it's Cootie. I've been wrong this whole time. I gotta show the game the proper respect. So what are your memories of Cootie? Have you played it? Comment below and let me know. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.